All right, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a former teacher of French and Spanish and then a supervisor of world languages. I served as the coordinator of world languages and international education at the New Jersey Department of Education and also as the director of the Office of Academic Standards. My most recent position was at Kean University as director of the School for Global Education and Innovation, where our focus is teacher development. I am now currently serving as a consultant for Kean as director of StarTalk language initiatives, in addition to undertaking other consulting projects. So that's a very quick snapshot. My area of focus, I have to say, has been project-based learning, specifically project-based language learning for many years. And I do have a project in mind for myself. I would like to author a publication specifically for language teachers. So with a little time, hopefully, I can get that completed. So moving on to the presentation. As a very quick introduction, this session is really going to highlight the efficacy of what we are terming global project-based language learning, which we are continuing to use in summer language immersion programs for heritage learners of Hindi and Urdu. We feel this model has a strong potential for application at various language proficiency levels, learning environments, and program models. A little bit about our project background. Our global project-based language learning programs are conducted in the School for Global Education and Innovation, housed within Kean University's College of Education, which also houses our Department of World Languages. For those of you who may not be familiar, StarTalk is a federal grant program funded by the National Security Agency that for the past 7 years has sought to expand and improve the teaching and learning of strategically important world languages not widely taught in the United States currently. And this is primarily for national security purposes as well as for fostering international relationships. Our School for Global Education and Innovation has been awarded funding to offer StarTalk programs for a number of grant cycles and has been recognized due to our innovative learning approaches utilized in both teacher and student programs and the resulting teacher and student outcomes. The theoretical framework for global project-based language learning, of course, is the revised World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages, which stress the application of learning a language beyond the instructional setting, the goal being to prepare learners to apply skills and understandings measured by the standards to bring global competence to their future careers and experiences. This also was underscored by the ACTFL position statement, Reaching Global Competence, developed the same year in 2014. Needless to say, Buck Institute for Education is a wonderful resource, and certainly there's wonderful information about research on the efficacy of project-based learning that can be found on their website. So we do, the principles of project-based learning are very much part of our theoretical framework, as is understanding by design. A lot of schools across the country are using understanding by design by Wiggins and McTighe as the instructional and assessment method for their program. Finally, Educating for Global Competence, Preparing Our Youth to Engage with the World is a document that is available as a PDF online, produced by the Asia Society and the Council for Chief State School Officers in conjunction with the National Task Force that focuses on preparing students for global competence across content areas, including world languages, with many examples, rubrics, and so forth. But that document is a key piece of our work. They define global competence as the capacity and the disposition to understand and act on issues of local and global significance. And I want to say there are many, many definitions of global competence, but this is the one we've been using for our programs. For us, we consider the G in global project-based language learning as the value-added component to project-based learning for the reasons stated below. You know, we are, in our language classes, addressing the development of global competency by using global content and issues, which are really relevant for students and cognitively engaging for students. Also inherent in this model, then this is a non-negotiable, is the integration of daily opportunities for cross-cultural interactions via Skype or some type of video conferencing, mediated by the use of technology, a variety of technology tools into the learning process. Moreover, the third and important characteristic of our global project-based learning program is that the dimensions of global competence, investigating the world, recognizing perspectives, communicating effectively, and taking actions are completely congruent to the 5 standard goal areas as well as the modes of communication. So in the global project-based language learning class, you are always tapping into the standards and the modes of communication. There's a focus, as you know, on the development of intercultural competence as well as global competence in the profession right now. And in addition to addressing the common features of both of those sets of competencies, using language to interact appropriately in cultural contexts and to investigate and explain perspectives and actually experiencing the language and culture through authentic interaction, you know, which is I was nodding the whole time Liliana was presenting it because that whole element of authenticity is critical to project-based learning, especially project-based language learning. But in addition to addressing to those commonalities, students gain knowledge of global conditions. They better understand the interconnectedness of local and global issues and the interrelationship between language and culture in looking at those issues. They also have an opportunity to use their language to take action, to address issues, to make improvements, and they find solutions exhibiting their work to authentic audiences. So you can see that many of the components discussed by Liliana are very much a part of the global project-based approach. Let me give you some information about some of our programs. Here are, over the past 5 years, some of the themes that we have selected. Our focus is on global and societal issues, and we've especially tapped into the UN Millennium Development Goals. You know, they were just changed again in 2015, but we've been using them pretty much consistently to develop themes for the program. One of the overarching essential questions that we have included in every program since 2012 has been, and it's a question for reflection, how does the ability to communicate effectively in Hindi and Urdu assist in disseminating knowledge about and proposing solutions to a global issue? So in addition to that question, which is, once again, ongoing, it reoccurs, students think about it, they write about it, they reflect about it, there are obviously essential questions related to every topic in a global project-based language learning unit. I'll give you some examples. In 2014, the theme was protecting and promoting children's rights. The questions were, how do cultural beliefs affect children's rights? Is it feasible to establish one universal meaning of children's rights? And to what extent would that impact the quality of children's lives? In 2016, our summer program is going to focus on using Hindi and Urdu for careers in medicine and global health. We've identified the following questions as essential questions. How do cultural perspectives related to the diagnosis and treatment of illness and disease continue to impact successful treatment of illnesses? And what culturally appropriate actions may be taken to overcome cultural barriers to the diagnosis and treatment of specific diseases that are widespread in India and Pakistan and in that region of the world? Here is an example of the lesson planning template that we've been using. And a good part of that is based on the required StarTalk template, but we have also added other elements. In the first column, in terms of objectives, StarTalk obviously requires the linguistic and cultural objectives, and we have also added global competencies. The second column reflects learning, what we call learning episodes, all right? And these 4 or 5 learning episodes repeat themselves every day of the program, so the students always know the next, where they're moving into in terms of the next instructional tasks and what they're doing. The third column is hyperlinked to examples of what we call evidence of learning. It contains student products that have been developed in both Hindi and Urdu that are posted online to assist teachers in seeing exemplars of the types of products that students are capable of developing. For example, how do learners demonstrate meeting the lesson targets, for example, under learning episodes? In preparing for Skype sessions, what are the kinds of things they might do? Well, I can also say part of our program is based on the flipped classroom. So every evening before they meet, the students have to view a video, perhaps to read some articles, maybe to conduct interviews with members of the heritage community or family members. But there's always a flipped classroom element of it. In the morning when they come in preparation for Skype, they would be discussing the interpretive readings or viewing as the context for the Skype session, comparative analysis, and questions for guided conversations. In the actual Skype session, they are engaging in culturally appropriate exchanges where they share research, they justify their points of view, they express opinions, and they explain and resolve a lot of cultural misinterpretations with themselves and the native students in India and Pakistan. For the past 5 years, we have had partner schools in India and Pakistan and have also had opportunities for our teachers to plan the program and the lessons with the teachers in India and Pakistan. So it's been a very rich experience. After the Skype session, we have a debriefing. Well, what new perspectives did you gain? What did you learn? What other questions do you have? They then compare and contrast information. They talk about the insights they've gained. They analyze and weigh new information gained. And you're going to see examples of some of the products that they engage in, such as literacy chats, debates, and blog posts as part of the debriefing and reflection. Finally, after lunch is the application. We call it transfer of learning. And here they collaboratively create products and performances for presentational purposes, such as multimedia messages, infomercials, slogans, political cartoons, et cetera, that are all part of the activities and of the tasks that lead them to the creation of the final product. I mentioned that in 2015, one of the themes, if I go back on that particular slide, was the role of humanitarian organizations in addressing local and global issues in India and Pakistan. Well, the final product for that particular program was developing an advocacy product for use by NGOs in India and Pakistan that focused on health or education issues. Students, let me give you a very quick overview. Students first had to do some research on those NGOs online and select one that they would invite to partner with based on their interest on a particular global issue. Once partnerships were established, students then found out what some needs are of those particular NGOs. NGOs participated in Skype calls and provided various information to the students. So you can see that students did have, we honored their voice and choice in terms of both the selection of NGOs that they wish to partner with, and the development of the products that were needed by those NGOs for advocacy purposes for health and education. You know, I have a few, and I'll try to go as briefly as possible here. I have a few sample student performances. So, Stephen, I'll be able to link onto these, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Anything that you do now, you're going to be sharing with everyone.
Terrific.
So you should be able to, yeah.
Okay, all right. So in this one, they're preparing for a Skype session, and based on what they had to do the evening before, this is a political cartoon created by two students in which they expressed their views about the impact of politics on education. And the night before, the students wrote blog posts in Hindi and in Urdu. Here, this is just the Hindi blog post. And this sort of provided the context for the Skype discussion the next day, okay? So the cartoon was created, they did their blog posting online, they came in the next morning, they discussed, exchanged views, and then there's sharing and more exchange with the native students in India and Pakistan. As an example of the debriefing, reflection, and new learning episode, this is a Venn diagram in Urdu. We had to take a snapshot of it because we need the students, while they use technology 99% of the time, for purposes of writing the script, we like them to actually write it, you know, on a piece of paper. So here's an example of a Venn diagram that was produced as part of the debriefing after a Skype session. Here's an example of we call it a literacy chat. And basically it's basically an electronic text chat that is very helpful in assessing developing literacy skills, in which a student team defined by different colors responds to discussion questions that they've either posted or by the teacher, enabling them to exchange and gain other perspectives through writing in real time. So you can see, as you see, there's other colors here, meaning other teams are responding, and so forth. So this literacy chat has been a really effective mechanism in getting to develop literacy skills, which most of these heritage students really need.
Can I break in just
Sure.
for a second? Mm-hmm. You said chat, but actually technically that's a collaborative document, is it not? That students are chatting inside a Google Doc?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Nice.
We just call it a literacy text chat. Just try to beef it up a little bit. Right. You're exactly correct. Okay. This last example, and there's so much. It was so hard to choose. This was part of the 2014 Star Talk program, which was protecting and promoting children's rights. The Urdu students produced an advocacy website. In this particular, the final project there was a performance. We had the Hindi consulate, the Urdu consulate. We had all kinds of different political figures in the community there, where they took their final product was to choose one of the visual and performing arts as a medium of advocacy for protecting and promoting children's rights. And I'm just going to click on the documentary here. And I think this one was on, yes, the loss of innocence through child marriage, which is very common in Pakistan. These videos were entirely produced and created by the students, and I'll very quickly show you a sample. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time, only because I'm not sure how many of you understand Urdu, but a lot of these projects are available online. Okay, so I'm jumping to pre and post assessment data, and here we're just showing Hindi. Okay, I'm going to talk a little about the Urdu pre and post in a minute. But for both Hindi and Urdu students, they had to have a certain level of proficiency to be admitted into the program. So we did, two of our teachers are certified OPI testers. We did informal LPIs, reading proficiency tests, and informal WPTs to determine their level. Most of them are pretty proficient orally. Obviously, it's the literacy skills where there's more work needed. We also did the CAPS test, which is a reading test developed by Castles. And we did that as a post, and then a pre, and then as a post test. And you can see in this particular sample that most students did make gains on the CAPS post test. In addition, the final assessment is the NYU proficiency test, and we use the 12-point test. We also use Linguafolio as a pre and post assessment. Now, I'm going to talk a little on this next slide. This next slide has both Hindi and Urdu data, and it's data from 2012 to 2014 based on the test scores reported and credits granted for the NYU proficiency test. Incidentally, they're in the process. They have changed that, much like the College Board, the advanced placement test, to be more proficiency and performance-based over the past year, which is a good thing. So if we look at 2012 for the Hindi data, 17 students in the program, 17 out of 17 received credit on the NYU proficiency test, with 10 of those 17 receiving a score of 12. Same thing in 2013, we had a smaller group. We had 11 students, and 7 received the full 12 points, 10 received 2, and so forth and so on. You can read the chart. If you look at the Urdu data, you'll notice, and we saw this in the pre-testing data as well, that the scores are consistently lower in all areas and significantly lower in reading and writing than Hindi. And we found that the most significant factors contributing to the lower skill levels in the pre-testing that we see in both is the limited access to Urdu and the means to improve it due to socioeconomic factors, religious beliefs prohibiting access to movies and media and so forth, and cultural practice at home. Same thing in the post-assessment data. But while lower than the Hindi, we do see increases in literacy skill development over the brief 3-week program. Now, it's only 3 weeks for at least 50% of the students. Now, some of the contributing factors for those 50% of the students is that we also offer students pre-program online coaching sessions to bridge that literacy gap and to enable them to meet the program entry requirement. Also, some of the students transfer the skills of Urdu through exposure to the Quranic Arabic script, which is similar to Urdu script in religious studies, and so that's a benefit. And then some students, frankly, have more opportunities to visit Pakistan, and others in the program have the advantage of being recently immigrated students. So there's a number of factors explaining the variance in data in the gains made by both Hindi and Urdu students that we see here. We also collected some qualitative data and asked 2 main questions. The first, the features of the program that they found most beneficial in learning Hindi and Urdu. And responses, the primary responses in order of frequency were 1, use of technology, Skype sessions, digital products, social networking tools. Second was interacting with Indian and Pakistani students and classmates on group projects, because they did, and I did not mention, they do collaborate with the native students in India and Pakistan on developing their final products. The third was learning about a global issue in depth and how it affects people in India and Pakistan. And the fourth one was not using a textbook. In terms of their ability to read and write Hindi and Urdu, they had 3 choices: greatly improved, and improved more than expected. In order of frequency, the first was most felt that they definitely improved their ability to read and write. Second response was improved more than expected, and the third was greatly improved. more qualitative data, very interesting. You can read these yourselves, but I'll read the first one and the last one. An Urdu student commented, "It was completely a new experience to use Urdu, not in its grammatical or mechanical sense, but rather as a method of communication with actual students in Pakistan as part of an enriching technological experience." A Hindi student, in the last comment, "I was apprehensive about how much Hindi I was really going to learn when we were simultaneously supposed to be discussing the complex topic of education, equity, and gender issues. However, even by halfway point of this course, I can truthfully say that I learned more Hindi than I thought possible. I find myself breezing through paragraphs in Hindi that I never dreamed I could read better, yet comprehend." All in all, we have found that the project also has had an impact on teacher development. And to that end, we were invited to submit a planning grant for the development of a master's degree program in Hindi and Urdu language pedagogy. And that was due to the outcomes of both the student and teacher programs and the need in the field to address the current lack of a strong infrastructure at national and state levels to support Hindi and Urdu teacher development and research. So we submitted the planning grant and are just about through 99% through the program approval process and are going to be able to offer the program formally this fall. Teachers have taken some courses non-matriculated during the summer. Some of the features of the program include, obviously, the integration of the innovative learning technologies and language-specific research-based best practices in both face-to-face and online learning environments. The use of pedagogical approaches to foster the development of global competency through language learning and also to assess global competence. And the benefit of having content area expertise. Most of the master's courses will be co-taught with a content expert and a pedagogy expert. Some of our partners are NYU, South Asian Study Program, the South Asia Institute of Columbia, the University of Texas at Austin, which was formerly the Hindi-Urdu flagship, the National Heritage Resource Center at UCLA Berkeley, and Carla at the University of Minnesota. We're excited about what we feel would be the use of replication for this program for other critical need languages, which will really assist in cultivating mainstream interest in pedagogy in the critical need languages field and in the language education field itself. So I feel on some level with 20 minutes I've kind of rushed through this, but I hope you have found information about our program helpful. If I go back to the first slide, the introductory slide, well, I don't have my email on there. It's simply jjensen@kane.edu. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, Janice. Stephen here.
Okay.
Towards the end of your presentation, we did lose a little bit of audio.
Oh.
But I don't think that it was critical, and it's a system problem. It's not a problem with your microphone or anything. Well, now we have some time to deal with questions from our audience. I think the project that you've mentioned, not only does it combine two languages that are linguistically quite related, but culturally, and politically divided. But also you're dealing with a population of students who have a baseline of proficiency, and so our participants might be wondering how your findings and the model that you've used in your program could apply to students who have a broad range of proficiencies or students who are, how you think this model applies to beginning students. So as a starter, maybe you could talk a little bit about the students in your program. They must have come to you with varying levels of proficiency at the beginning, and how did you differentiate instruction to address those different levels of proficiency for this varied population?
Well, let me speak about the speaking part first. Most of them were at least intermediate high or higher in terms of speaking proficiency. In terms of reading and writing, the skills were all over. We did, as I said, provide some pre-program coaching for students that we could bring up to the intermediate level. And then throughout the instructional process, we did need to differentiate. Well, we use the UDL, the Universal Design for Learning, by process, by content, by the different types of tasks involved. So differentiation was ongoing. Also, there were opportunities during the course of the day for coaching sessions, both by the teachers and with peers.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that you've noticed that most of our teachers are quite concerned about dealing with language instruction at the beginning level and how a project-based model applies. Do you have any further thoughts on that?
I do. And that's why I've got to write that book, because I feel that it can be done effectively at all proficiency levels and at different age groups. And what we've experimented with is looking at some exemplars of project-based learning projects as a source of ideas, if you will, okay, that can be applied to different age groups and different proficiency levels. And we've tried to modify those to project-based using certain language instruction strategies, scaffolding, using lots of scaffolding and so forth, and you would be surprised at the kinds of things you can do. I will take something very simple like, there's a focus on healthy eating, right? And especially with young children, what do you like to snack on? What do you like to eat? If you have a partnership with a school, or can obtain a partnership, and there are all kinds of resources to do that, with a school in the target language country, all right? I think the children, even at a very novice level, taking polls and collecting data and reporting those simple things. Well, 5 students in my class always eat potato chips for a snack, or, simple, kinds of simple language novice learners can engage in. What the exciting part and what makes it authentic is sharing that information with students in the target language country and having those interactions with students. It's so interdisciplinary, too, because in this particular instance, which just comes to mind right now, they're using math, and they're using their writing skills, granted simple sentences and so forth and so on, but also they're getting that charge and excitement about being able to communicate with students. For example, in China, what do Chinese students like to eat for snacks after school, and just comparing and contrasting. Now, while that doesn't meet the exact level of authenticity that we would like, for a very young child, a very novice learner of the language, and a very young child, I think they would find that as real world. It is an example of real world use of language. You can also have students report out about that to the community, especially if there are Chinese speakers in the community. They can do a forum or a presentation on what they have found in relation to their Chinese counterparts on healthy eating. And once again, I'm making this up as spontaneously as we're speaking. So.
Right. Well, so speaking about interacting with and getting data from a partner group, some people have asked, how do you set up daily opportunities for interaction? Skype was mentioned. Do you have a suggestion for students that you might not see every day, like how to rotate schedules? And what about time zones?
Well, for our particular program in the summer, it's not like having a school year program, although I'm sure, where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm sure that we can develop a schedule and a process to connect with the partner school, if not on a daily basis, maybe several times a week. But we have managed to do that. Sometimes nature takes over, though. I'll be honest with you, Stephen. This summer, they were experiencing terrible monsoon rains in Pakistan, and we were unable to contact the students. But that in itself was an experience for our kids. how something like that might interfere with communication. Sometimes in Pakistan, it's safety issues, and the students can't get to the school, or they'll have to conduct the sessions at home. So I do think there are ways, using some creative thinking, to integrate this into a regular school program.
Great, thank you for that. Now, speaking about connecting with other programs, if you've been following the chat, everyone, you will see that there is a link to a Google folder, a folder on Google Drive that has a lot of different documents in it. If you're interested in connecting with partner classrooms, there is one document in there called Resources for Connecting to Target Language Speakers. And that just takes you to some websites that are especially intended to connect classrooms across the globe. I'd like to remind everyone that the poll is open. If you're not, oh, sorry, the poll is finished. All right, so update on that. Thank you for participating. All right. Here is a sort of more classroom management type question, or a general pedagogy question that isn't restricted to PBLL. And so I would like to invite Lauren and or Liliana to jump in with their thoughts on this, as well as you, Janice. And that is, how are we sure that all the students in collaborative groups are participating? There are always students that don't participate so much, and then others that sort of control or become the voice of the group. How can we be sure that all of them are participating?
Well, I think I'll take a first stab at that question. I think I know in our classrooms, placement of students in various groups is critical, and that's number one. So you have to think about different skills that they bring to the group. But I think, and how they work well together, and that's after the first couple of days you could get a good handle on that. But then as the students are working collaboratively, the role of the teacher is to constantly be, walking around the classroom, listening into conversations, asking probing questions occasionally from group to group and so forth. So I think there are strategies that can be used where you can really get a good handle. Even sometimes walking around with a simple checklist and making a notation of how many times certain students are speaking and the quality of what they're contributing to the conversation is another possibility.
Thank you. I'd like to add that if in a group each person has a distinct job, then they're more likely to complete that because there's no one else who can do it. And if they don't do it, then it's not going to get done. All right. There's another question about the interaction between content knowledge and language knowledge in project-based language learning. So Yiling Xu asked us, how can we, as teachers, educate ourselves on thinking about different projects or roles that we want the students to perform? For example, if we want the students to be an engineer, doing some kind of design or prototype, they need that specialized knowledge from the engineering field. How can we start or get a knowledge set if we ourselves don't have an engineering background?
Oh, that's a fabulous question, and that certainly speaks to the change and the shift in the role of teacher, not only as facilitator and learning agent, but as a co-creator and co-learner. And I think when you undertake any project, there's a certain amount of foundational knowledge that you need to have, but you also definitely should have a partner expert. I know when we did the program on water sustainability in India and Pakistan, and water availability and so forth, we did engage one of the professors from Kane to be our advisor on the project. So if you're doing something that specific, I think you do need someone with some content area expertise.
All right, I'm going to sort of play devil's advocate a little bit and address a question that participants didn't bring up, but that I'm curious about. And my motivations are purely personal. I've found that in thinking about projects and things that students can do in the world, we often find ourselves, we think about NGOs, we think about improvements that can be made, global problems that can be solved. How do we avoid placing ourselves and our students in the role of, say, the missionary or the fixer who is going to bring something to the other side, and how do we make it a more equal exchange so that the two sides are getting something from each other?
Well, I think that's integral into the design of the project. Through our daily Skype interactions, students are hearing, there is exchange of perspectives, and they are, it mirrors what you do in the real world. As a business person in the real world, if I'm assigned a project, very often I'm up in the middle of the night communicating with someone on the other side, but we have to collaborate on the development of that project. And I think that's what's so unique about the global project-based learning, because you're hearing the other perspectives. You have to have some kind of a meeting of the mind, I guess, in completing the task you're assigned. But also, I think the development of one of the things, developing global competencies with the goal of global citizenship. Given the era of globalization, these are things that are 21st century skills. So when I'm learning a language and I'm developing these global competencies, I'm preparing students for careers, many changing careers in the course of a lifetime. So I really do see, I don't always see them in the role of missionaries. The thing I like the best about the project-based learning is understanding how to work cross-culturally, valuing others' perspectives, and problem solving across boundaries. That's really what I see as a tremendous benefit.
Thank you for that commentary. I'm going to be sharing a link from one of our participants that sort of goes into that. The question that I asked in some depth. It's very, it's a fascinating topic. And Adam, I would like to note, has shared in the chat another perspective on group participation and ensuring the equal contribution. All right, let's see here. What other questions have we come up with? Yes, Iftikhar Haider had asked whether, Janice, the research that you mentioned has already been written up and published somewhere.
Well, I said I was very interested in writing, probably co-authoring with one of my StarTalk colleagues, a book, not so much with more practical examples of that question that always comes up. What does it look like at the novice, intermediate, advanced level, and with different age groups of students? I think more of a book to provide resources for teachers, actual projects just for language learning teachers. So that's really what I was speaking of or alluding to.
Great. I think you will have an expectant reader audience, certainly this group, and no doubt many more. And with that, we're coming to the end of our time. So with many thanks to our presenters today, I'd like to wrap it up. If anyone has any last-minute desperate questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat. It looks like we might not be able to get to all of them, however. Okay. Here's one I think, Janice, you might be able to address. Now, we often use rubrics to assess student performance. Ideally, we always use them. And Daniela is asking whether any of the panelists have had students build rubrics for assessment of their projects, build their own rubrics. If Liliana's around, maybe she could share about that. I know Lauren had to leave. Oh, both Lauren and Liliana have had to leave, so they're not available. Janice, do you have any experience with students?
Occasionally. These would be the students that have more experience with actually using rubrics in the classroom. You know what I'm saying? You can't ask them to build it if they have not been using a rubric. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But for the most part, yeah, you have to educate them. No, I have not done it that much. I've done it occasionally, but not that much. It is very helpful. It's a very good idea, certainly. I think a very in terms of using rubrics, it is so valuable for them to understand what it takes to be a good peer reviewer, a good to do a good critique. They have to provide evidence for what they're saying. So there's lots of other learning that goes into, the use of rubrics, and I'm sure that's obvious to most. But I have found that they become, they're able to cite evidence, which is something that is very important, I know, in the new standards, to be able to cite evidence for what they're seeing or hearing or reading or writing in terms of how it met or it did not meet a rubric.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And with that, Janice, thank you for your presentation. We're going to draw today's session to a close, and we will see everyone tomorrow, same time, same station.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Great. Aloha.
Aloha.
So long, everyone.
Bye-bye.